She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not send the angry text or show up at his door at midnight. She did not beg. She did not explain herself to anyone who had not earned the right to understand her. She did something far more powerful. She waited. She built. She survived every single thing he put her through, alone, quietly, without anyone holding her hand. And then, on one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, she walked into his office, in a cream blazer, in flats because heels would have been trying too hard, with her leather folder in one hand and his son sleeping against her chest. The son he did not know existed. The son she had carried, delivered, and raised entirely alone. Because the night she came home to tell him the best news of her life, he looked at her like she was nothing and told her to get out. So she did. She got out. She built herself back from zero. She became someone he could not recognize. And then she showed up, not to beg, not to fight, not to ask for anything, just to sign the papers, just to close the door. Except the door did not close the way she planned. Because when Dominic Carson looked up from behind his desk, his fiancée sitting right beside him, her diamond ring catching the light, and he saw what Natalie was carrying, everything in his world stopped. Stay with us. Because this is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about what a woman becomes when someone tells her she is worthless, and she decides to prove them wrong so thoroughly, so completely, that the proof walks into their office and sleeps peacefully against her chest. Lesson statement. What you are about to hear is this. Being left does not mean you are less. Being told you are worthless does not make it true. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply refuse to disappear. Meaning and value, this story is for every woman who has ever been made to feel small by someone she loved. Every woman who went through something hard without anyone beside her. Every woman who rebuilt herself in the quiet, without applause, without an audience, just because she had no other choice, and she was stronger than she knew. You will find yourself in Natalie, in her anger, and her love, and her exhaustion, and her dignity. You will find moments in this story that sound like your own life, said out loud for the first time. And you will find by the end that the most satisfying justice is not revenge. It is becoming someone the person who hurt you cannot stop thinking about. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, stay with us. Every chapter of Natalie's story is worth hearing through to the end. The moment that changes everything is not the one you will expect. And when it comes, you will want someone to share it with. So right now, before we begin, if you have ever rooted for a woman who refused to break, hit that like button. Leave a comment that says, I am staying, so we know you are here with us. Share this with one person in your life who needs to hear that they are not worthless. And if you are new to this family, subscribe. We tell stories here that matter, stories that stay with you, stories that remind you who you are when life has done its best to make you forget. We are glad you are here. Now, let us begin.
The elevator smelled like leather and expensive air conditioning. Natalie Carson stood inside it alone, one hand gripping the handle of a baby carrier, the other pressing flat against her stomach. Not from nerves, she told herself, from habit. The habit of holding herself together in spaces that used to belong to her. She looked at her reflection in the polished steel doors. Cream blazer, dark jeans, flats because heels would have been trying too hard, her hair pulled back, clean and deliberate, her face composed in the way that takes years to learn, not the absence of emotion, but the complete and total control of it. Against her chest, Oliver slept. 4 months old, soft brown hair, tiny fist curled against the fabric of her blouse. His breathing was even and peaceful, his face so perfect it made her chest ache every time she looked at it. He did not know where they were going. He did not know that this building, Carson Enterprises, 40 floors of glass and steel and legacy, belonged to his father. He did not know his father had no idea he existed. Natalie knew. And she had carried that knowledge for 4 months, the same way she had carried Oliver, alone, carefully, without a single person to hold her hand. The elevator chimed. 40th floor. The doors opened, Natalie Carson stepped out like she owned the place. Because once she had. The receptionist at the executive level looked up and went completely still. Her eyes dropped to the carrier, rose to Natalie's face, dropped to the carrier again. Mrs. Carson, I mean, Ms. He's in a meeting. Perfect timing, Natalie said pleasantly. She walked past the desk before the woman could find another word, down the hallway, past the framed magazine covers featuring Dominic's face, past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like a declaration of ownership. She reached the double doors at the end of the hall. She did not knock. She pushed them open. The scene inside was almost exactly what she had prepared herself for. Dominic Carson sat behind his mahogany desk, the one she had helped him choose 3 years ago, back when she believed the things he promised her. Navy suit, perfectly tailored, jaw sharp, posture the kind that boardrooms reward. He looked exactly like the man she had married. He looked exactly like the man who had destroyed her. Perched on the edge of his desk, comfortable, proprietary, was Cassandra Blake. Blonde, 30 years old, a diamond ring on her left hand catching the afternoon light like it had been positioned to do exactly that. Both of them looked up when the doors opened. Cassandra's smile froze mid-formation. Dominic's face moved through 3 expressions in under 2 seconds, blank, then white. Then, something Natalie did not have a name for. The look of a man watching the floor disappear beneath him. Natalie. His voice cracked on her name, just slightly, just enough. She walked into the room like she had an appointment. The baby carrier rocked gently with each step. Oliver slept on, unaware, unbothered, the most peaceful person in the room by a considerable margin. Natalie set the leather folder on Dominic's desk, right beside Cassandra's hand, and looked at him directly. I am here to sign the divorce papers, she said. I assume you still have them. Dominic stood slowly. His eyes had moved from her face to the carrier and had not moved back. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Cassandra slid off the desk. Dominic, who is... Natalie answered before he could locate his voice. I am his wife. A brief pause. Well, soon-to-be ex-wife. She adjusted the carrier strap on her shoulder. And this is Oliver. The silence that followed had weight to it. The particular weight of a room full of people understanding, all at once, that everything has changed. Oliver chose that moment to stir, not a cry, just a small, drowsy sound. The noise a baby makes when shifting between one dream and the next. But it was enough to draw every eye in the room to his tiny face. Even from across the desk, the resemblance was undeniable. Oliver had Dominic's nose, his mouth, the particular line of his jaw. Cassandra's hand flew to her lips. Dominic took one step forward. The color had left his face entirely. Is that... He stopped. Is that my... Congratulations, Natalie said. You are a father. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times since leaving his apartment 14 months ago. She had rehearsed it in the parking lot of the urgent care clinic at midnight, when the nurse told her the baby was fine, and she sat in her car alone for an hour before she could drive. She had rehearsed it during morning sickness, during the 16 hours of labor with only Rachel beside her, during every ultrasound appointment where the technician asked cheerfully whether Dad would be joining next time. She had rehearsed it so many times that standing here, now, felt almost like a memory of something that had already happened. Dominic, you were pregnant. Dominic's voice was barely functional. When you left, you were pregnant. I came home to tell you, Natalie said. Her voice was steady, factual. She had decided long ago that she would not perform this. She would simply report it. I had the test in my purse. I had taken it twice to be sure. I was so happy I could barely drive straight. She looked at him directly. You were drunk, sitting on the couch with a bottle of whiskey. You looked at me like I was the last person you wanted to see. Dominic's jaw tightened. I said I had something wonderful to tell you, and you said you did not want to hear it. She kept going, each word placed with precision. You said I was suffocating you. You said I was worthless. You told me to get out of your life. She reached into the leather folder, pulled out the divorce papers, set a pin on top of them, and slid everything across the desk. So I got out. I went through the entire pregnancy alone. Morning sickness, every appointment, labor, 16 hours. I brought him home from the hospital by myself and spent the first night in a rocking chair, terrified I was doing everything wrong. She held his gaze, but I figured it out, because that is what you do when you have no other option. She tapped the papers. Sign. I do not want your money. I do not want anything from you. Just sign, and we are done, and you never have to see my worthless face again. The word landed in the room like something thrown. Dominic flinched so visibly that Cassandra took a half-step backward. Natalie. He moved around the desk toward her. Wait, please. If I had known, you did not want to know. Her voice was final. You told me to leave, so I left. That was your choice. She looked at him one more time, and her eyes held no softness, no opening, nothing that could be mistaken for an invitation. I made mine. She turned toward the door. Natalie? Sign the papers, Dominic. She walked out, down the hallway, into the elevator. The doors closed. His voice echoed from somewhere behind them just before they did. Natalie, please. She looked down at Oliver, his face peaceful against her shoulder. It is just us, baby, she whispered. It has always been just us. The elevator reached the lobby. She walked out into the afternoon light. Behind her, Cassandra Blake stood in Dominic's office, staring at the diamond on her finger with the slow, terrible understanding that she had been wearing the jewelry of a lie. And Dominic stood in his doorway, his empire intact, his future secured, his success undeniable, watching the woman he had driven away disappear with the son he had never known. The unsigned divorce papers sat on his desk. For the first time in his adult life, Dominic Carson understood what it meant to lose everything that actually mattered. Natalie reached her car in the parking garage. She buckled Oliver in, smoothed the blanket, closed the rear door, got in the driver's seat, put both hands on the steering wheel, and let herself shake. Just for a moment, just long enough to release the pressure that had been building since she stepped into that elevator. One tear formed. She wiped it before it finished falling. Not here, not for him. She started the car. Narrator, voiceover. There are women who fall apart in the moments they have every right to, and there are women who save it for the parking garage. Both are valid. Both are real. Natalie Carson was the second kind. Not because she was stronger, but because she had learned the hard way that some tears are too expensive to spend in front of the person who caused them. 6 weeks later. Natalie's apartment was small and exactly right. 2 bedrooms in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from her old life. The kitchen was stocked. The baby things were organized with the precision of someone who had learned to be their own system of support. Bottles drying on a rack by the sink, a bouncer in the corner, a basket of tiny folded clothes that somehow always needed refolding. On the shelf above the couch, photographs. Natalie at 8 months pregnant, laughing at something off camera. Natalie in a hospital bed, holding a newborn Oliver for the first time, exhausted and radiant. Oliver at 2 weeks, at 6 weeks, at 3 months. Dominic was not in any of them. Rachel Monroe sat on Natalie's kitchen counter, a position she occupied so frequently that Natalie had essentially stopped trying to redirect her, working through a sleeve of crackers that were not hers. "Okay," Rachel said, in the tone of someone who had been building toward something, "but you have to admit, the look on his face when you walked in with Oliver was—" She made a gesture that communicated peak cinema. "It was not supposed to be cinema," Natalie said. She was at the stove, one eye on a pot, Oliver and the bouncer nearby making small, exploratory sounds at the ceiling fan. "It was supposed to be closure, girl. That was closure, with a special effects budget and a live audience. There was no audience. There was a fiancée, that counts." Rachel crunched. What was she like in person? Pretty. Confused. Natalie stirred. Not the enemy. Rachel considered this. That is very evolved of you. She did not know. He told her he was divorced? Bitcha. Oh, he is absolutely... Rachel stopped herself with visible effort. Anyway, how are you actually doing? Not the version you tell me, so I will not worry. The real one. Natalie was quiet for a moment. "I am tired," she said finally. "The kind of tired that sleep does not fix. But I am okay. Oliver is okay. And okay is enough right now." Rachel looked at her best friend with the specific attention of someone who knows a person well enough to see what they are not saying. "You are allowed to be more than okay," she said, quieter now. "You went through all of that alone, Nat. Every single part of it. I know. It is not weakness to say it was hard. I know that too." Okay. Rachel ate another cracker. "Then I will stop being profound and tell you that Oliver smiled at me this morning in a way that clearly means he knows I am the fun one. He is 4 months old. Babies know things." Natalie laughed. "Genuinely. The kind that surprises you." Oliver, hearing his mother laugh, kicked both feet with enormous enthusiasm. The text came at 9:43 that evening. Unknown number. One message. Natalie read it twice. "This is Dominic. I know I have no right to contact you. I know I have no right to ask anything, but I am begging you, Natalie. Please, can we talk?" She set the phone face down on the counter. "He texted," she said. Rachel, who had been washing her single dish with the thoroughness of someone completing community service, went very still. "Delete it." "I did not respond." "Delete the number." "I am not ready to do that yet." Rachel set down the dish. That is how they get back in. One unanswered text becomes two. Two becomes a call at midnight. A midnight call becomes, I know, Rach. Do you? Because I have watched you be reasonable and fair and gracious for 6 weeks, and at some point, all of that starts looking like a door left open. Natalie looked at her phone on the counter. Narrator voiceover. Actionable advice. Number 1. Here is something worth sitting with. We often confuse keeping someone's number with not having decided yet. We tell ourselves we are just processing. And sometimes that is true, but sometimes it is something else entirely. The question worth asking yourself is this: am I keeping this door open because I genuinely have not made a decision, or because part of me wants them to walk back through it? One of those is processing, the other is a choice. Know which one you are making. That clarity will protect you. Across the city, at approximately the same moment, Dominic Carson was not sleeping. His penthouse was immaculate and empty in the way that expensive things are when there is no one in them who matters. Connor Webb sat across from him. Connor had been Dominic's closest friend since college. Steady, grounded, the kind of man who told hard truths without enjoying the telling of them. He was drinking coffee because someone in this room needed to be functional. Cassandra left, Dominic said. I know, she called me. She left the ring on my desk. Smart woman. Connor paused. She said she felt like she had spent a year being in love with a man who was already somewhere else. Dominic said nothing. She was not wrong. It was not a question. I have a son, Connor. Dominic said it slowly, like a man still learning the shape of the words. I have a 4-month-old son, and I did not know he existed. You did not know because you told his mother to leave. I was drunk. I did not. He stopped. I know that is not an excuse. No, Connor said. It is not. Dominic ran both hands over his face. He looked, Connor thought, like a man who had aged 10 years and 6 weeks, which was accurate. I need to find her. I need to... No. Connor's voice was firm. You absolutely do not go to her. Not now. Not uninvited. He is my son. He is. And the worst thing you can do for your son right now is charge toward his mother when she has made it completely clear she does not want to hear from you. Connor leaned forward. You want my actual advice? Not particularly. Too bad. Sit with what you did. Feel the full weight of it. Do not rush to fix it because fixing it makes you feel better. Figure out who you want to be from here, and then, slowly and carefully, you let her set the pace. Dominic stared at the ceiling. Connor's phone rang, loudly. The ringtone was, inexplicably, Baby Shark. Connor snatched it up and silenced it in approximately 1 second, but the damage was done. Dominic stared at him. My niece changed it, Connor said, with considerable dignity. I cannot figure out how to reverse it. Baby Shark. We are not discussing this. Connor, Baby Shark. Dominic. I will physically leave this apartment. Dominic looked at his best friend. And for the first time in 6 weeks, something in his expression shifted. Not a smile. Smile, exactly. The memory of one. It faded quickly. But it had been there. 8 weeks passed. Natalie returned to work part-time. She rebuilt her daily routine from scratch, the way you rebuild anything after it has been demolished, one piece at a time, without looking at the full picture too long. She did not respond to Dominic's text. She did not delete his number, either. On week 12, attorney Glenn Foster called. Glenn Foster was the kind of family law attorney who had seen everything at least twice and had strong opinions about most of it. He was direct, thorough, and had told Natalie on their first meeting that he did not do sugarcoating. Natalie, he said carefully, I have news. Dominic's legal team reached out this morning. He is declining to pursue formal custody arrangements. His attorney conveyed, and I am reading directly here, that Mr. Carson will accept whatever terms Ms. Carson determines are appropriate and will make no counter-demands. Natalie sat down on the couch. He is not fighting. He is explicitly choosing not to fight. In 22 years of family law, I have heard that approximately never. She looked at Oliver on his playmat, batting at a hanging giraffe with enormous concentration. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you, Glenn. She hung up. Sat with it. Narrator, voiceover. The first crack in a wall is almost invisible. You do not notice it by looking directly at it. You notice it because the light comes through differently. The terms were exact and non-negotiable. Sundays only. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Rachel present for the entire visit. No photographs. No social media. No sharing information about the visits with friends or family until Natalie said otherwise. 1 hour. If Oliver was distressed for any reason, the visit ended immediately. No discussion. Dominic agreed to every condition without argument. He arrived the first Sunday at exactly 2 o'clock. Rachel answered the door. She looked at him the way a very small but extremely confident guard dog might look at an unexpected visitor. Shoes off at the door, she said. Wash your hands at the kitchen sink. Sit in the chair by the window, not the couch. The chair. Understood. You are on a very short leash. I know. Good. She stepped aside. Come in. Natalie was on the couch when Dominic walked into the living room. Oliver was on her lap, examining his own fingers with the focused intensity of a scientist conducting important research. She did not stand, did not smile, gave him a single nod. You may proceed. The distance between them, her on the couch, him in the chair by the window, was deliberate. A room's width of earned mistrust. He just ate, Natalie said. Her voice was professional, clinical. He is clean. He has been sleeping well this week. If he cries, I take him back in immediately. If he seems uncomfortable at any point, the visit is over. Are we clear? Clear. You have 1 hour. She stood and walked toward Dominic. His hands started shaking before she even reached the chair. Support his head, she said. He cannot hold it fully on his own yet. One hand behind his neck, one under his bottom. She demonstrated the position with her own hands. Then, with the careful deliberateness of someone handing over something irreplaceable, she placed Oliver in Dominic's arms. The weight of his son hit Dominic like a physical force. Oliver was so small, so warm, so entirely alive. His little body curved instinctively, and his dark eyes, Dominic's eyes, the precise shape of them, drifted upward and settled on Dominic's face. Just looking, curious and unafraid, the way babies are before they learn to be afraid of anything. Hi, Dominic whispered. His voice had stopped working properly. Hi, buddy. I am your... He could not finish it. His throat closed completely. Oliver's face scrunched. His lower lip began to tremble. A cry, not a wail, but a climbing distress sound that brought Natalie forward immediately. Give him back. Wait, please, just a... Dominic, give him back now. He transferred Oliver back to her. The baby settled almost instantly against his mother's chest. The crying tapered to a whimper and then to silence. He does not know you, Natalie said. Her voice was not unkind. It was honest. You are a stranger to him. The words landed exactly as hard as they were meant to. Dominic put his head in his hands. Sit up. Natalie's voice was firm but not cruel. Try again. This time, stop being desperate. Hold him like he matters. Not like you are trying to prove something. He looked up. She was already extending Oliver toward him again. He took a slow breath, made his body calm the way you make a room calm, deliberately from the center outward. When Natalie placed Oliver in his arms the second time, Dominic did not rush, did not speak, just held him, steady and present, letting the baby adjust at his own pace. Oliver looked up at him again. This time, he did not cry. He simply looked, his small face serious and considering, working out what this person was and whether he was safe. That is it, Natalie said quietly. Just be there. So Dominic was there, and somewhere in the middle of the first hour, Oliver's eyes grew heavy. His tiny body relaxed by degrees. And then, without fanfare or announcement, Dominic's son fell asleep in his arms. Silent tears ran down Dominic's face. He did not move, did not breathe wrong, did not do a single thing that might disturb the most important moment of his life. In the corner of the room, Rachel watched. For the first time since this began, she said nothing at all. The visits became a pattern. Every Sunday at 2 o'clock. Every Sunday, Oliver a little more familiar with the stranger in the chair. Every Sunday, Dominic following every rule exactly. On the fourth visit, Oliver smiled at him. A real smile, not a reflex. A genuine expression of infant joy, aimed directly at Dominic's face. Did you see that? Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper. He smiled at me. Babies smile at everyone, Natalie said me say bustum from the couch. It does not mean anything. But Rachel, standing in her corner, caught Natalie's face in that exact moment, saw the flicker of something, recognition, fear, the particular look of a person watching a wall develop its first crack. On the 6th visit, Dominic made a mistake. He arrived 5 minutes early, just 5 minutes. He had been sitting in his car down the block, watching the clock, unable to make himself wait any longer. Natalie answered the door. She looked at him, then at her watch. You are early. I know. Just by a few minutes, Rules are rules. She closed the door. Dominic stood in the hallway and watched 5 minutes pass on his phone screen, second by second by second. At exactly 2 o'clock, he knocked again. Natalie let him in without a word. Next time you arrive early, she said as she handed him Oliver, you do not get in at all. Crystal clear? Crystal clear. After he left, Rachel sat with Natalie in the kitchen. You know you are being pretty strict. Good. He understands the boundaries, Nat. Look at him. He follows every single rule you set without complaint. Following rules is the minimum, Natalie said. The minimum does not earn anything extra. Rachel was quiet for a moment. He canceled a major business trip last month to keep a Sunday visit. Connor told me he turned down a meeting with a potential investor, someone he had been trying to get in front of for 2 years. Because it conflicted with this. She met Natalie's eyes. Men who are performing do not do that. Men who are performing cancel the visit and send flowers. Natalie looked at the empty chair by the window. I am terrified, she admitted. That Oliver will love him, that I will let Dominic back in because of that love, and that he will destroy us again. Those are fair fears, Rachel said. But here's the thing. There is a difference between protecting Oliver and protecting yourself. Both are valid. Both matter. Just know which one you are doing at any given moment. Do not use one as cover for the other. Narrator, voiceover, actionable advice. Number 2. This is worth writing down. When we are afraid to protect our own hearts, we sometimes hide behind our children's needs. We say we are doing this for them, and sometimes we are, but sometimes it is for us too. There is nothing wrong with that. What matters is the honesty. Clarity is not coldness. Knowing exactly what you are protecting and why, that is wisdom. It is also, eventually, the thing that sets you free. Cassandra Blake showed up on a Tuesday morning. Not with aggression, not with accusation. She stood at Natalie's door in a gray coat, no ring on her finger, and had the look of a woman who had driven a long way to say something she needed to say. Natalie opened the door with the chain on. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Cassandra's voice was quiet. Please. Just a few minutes. I am not here to defend him. I am not here to ask you for anything. She paused. I need to understand what I lost, what I was never really going to have. Natalie studied her through the gap for a long moment. Then she closed the door, slid the chain free, opened it fully. 5 minutes. Cassandra stepped inside and looked around at the apartment. The organized baby things, the photographs on the shelf, the evidence of a life built carefully from nothing. She looked at the photos of Natalie pregnant, glowing. Natalie in the hospital bed. Oliver at various stages of his short and perfect existence. Dominic was not in a single one. Natalie stood with Oliver on her hip. She did not sit. This was her space, her terms, her standing. He told me he was divorced, Cassandra said. When we started seeing each other, past tense, completely done. The papers are signed on my end. Natalie said. Whether he signs them is his problem. He told me what happened, what he said to you that night. And you came here to tell me he did not mean it? No. Cassandra met her eyes directly. I came because I spent a year with a man I thought loved me, and I just found out he was somewhere else the entire time. I needed to see. She stopped, started again. I needed to see what I was actually competing against. You were not competing against me, Natalie said. You were competing against his guilt. Cassandra absorbed that. He talked about you sometimes. He would catch himself, mention a restaurant, a song you liked, the way you organize things, and then stop like he had said something forbidden. I always knew there was someone before me who mattered more. I just told myself I was wrong. That person does not exist anymore. Natalie's voice was flat. The woman Dominic married died the night he told her she was worthless. I am what came after. Cassandra looked at Oliver. He is beautiful. He is. For just a moment, the armor shifted. He is everything good that came out of something broken. Do you still love him? The question sat in the room between them. Natalie's eyes came back up slowly. That is not relevant. It is completely relevant. If you do not, then Dominic is chasing something already gone. But if you do, if I do, it does not change anything. Natalie's voice sharpened. Love is a feeling. Action is what matters. He chose whiskey over me. He chose silence over an apology. He chose building a new relationship over ever coming to find me. Love without consistent action is just a feeling, and feelings alone do not raise babies. Cassandra stood. She looked at Natalie with something that had taken the short journey from pity to genuine respect. I am sorry he hurt you. I am sorry I was unknowingly part of something I did not fully understand. You did not do anything wrong, Natalie said. She opened the door. You fell in love with someone who was not available. That is not your fault. It is entirely his. At the threshold, Cassandra paused. For what it is worth, I think he really does love you. I think he always did. Love without respect, Natalie said quietly, is worthless. He lost my respect the night he called me worthless. Getting it back, if it is even possible, is the work of years, not weeks. The door closed. Natalie leaned against it. Texted Rachel. Cassandra came by. Rachel responded in approximately 4 seconds. What? Natalie. She is not the enemy. She is a casualty. Rachel. Are you okay? Natalie looked at Oliver, who was now deeply interested in her collar button. She typed back, Give me 5 minutes. She walked to the window and stood looking out at the street below, her son warm and solid against her hip, and let herself feel the full, inconvenient weight of what she was carrying. The love that was still there, stubborn and persistent. The damage that was also still there, equally so. Both real, both true, both hers to carry, whether she had chosen them or not. She did not need to resolve them today. Today, she just needed to stand here and breathe. Months passed in the way that months do when you are too busy surviving to count them. Oliver turned 7 months old and discovered that if he banged 2 plastic cups together, a sound happened. He found this extraordinary. He conducted research on it daily. The Sunday visits continued their pattern. Dominic arriving exactly on time, following every rule, building something careful and fragile with his son. On the 10th visit, Oliver reached for him, before Natalie even completed the transfer. On the 12th, Oliver fell asleep against Dominic's chest, and Dominic sat so still for the full remaining hour that Rachel later said he had not blinked once. She was probably exaggerating. Probably. Natalie had begun sitting on the couch instead of across the room, still watching, still alert, but closer. It was on one of these Sundays, after Dominic had left, after Rachel had gone home, after Oliver was down for his afternoon nap, that Natalie allowed herself to think the word maybe for the first time. Just maybe, just once. And then her phone rang. Attorney Glenn Foster. "Natalie," he said carefully, "I need you to sit down." She sat. "Tell me." "A lawsuit was filed in civil court this morning. A former Carson Enterprises employee, a woman named Laura Hendricks, is suing for wrongful termination. She alleges that she was fired after reporting a male colleague for workplace harassment." Glenn paused. "The incident occurred 18 months ago." 18 months ago, during the marriage, she is alleging, Glenn continued carefully, that Dominic was aware of the situation and covered it up to protect a high-revenue client relationship. The room was very quiet. "Glenn, I know what you are thinking. I was his wife and he was—" "I know. I cannot tell you what this means in terms of who he is. What I can tell you is that it is public record as of this morning, and it will be news by tomorrow." She hung up, pulled up the news on her phone. The headline was already there. Carson Enterprises CEO named in wrongful termination lawsuit. Former employee claims retaliation after reporting workplace harassment. She stared at the screen. The Sundays. Oliver reaching for Dominic. The careful progress. The word maybe she had let herself think exactly once. 20 minutes ago. She texted Dominic a single word. Leave. Her door buzzed a minute later. He was still in the building parking lot. She went to the door, opened it. He read her face and went completely still. What happened? She held up her phone with the headline facing him. He read it. His jaw tightened in a specific way she recognized. Not guilt exactly. The look of a man who knows exactly what is coming and knows it is going to cost him everything he has been building. That is not what it looks like. Get out of my apartment. Natalie. I said get out. She closed the door, stood against it with her eyes closed. Devastation peak number 2. The floor dropping out just as she had started to trust it. She had been so close to thinking maybe. She pressed her palms flat against the door and breathed. 3 days later. Natalie's door, chain on. Dominic through the gap, looking like he had not slept in 72 hours. I need you to hear the truth, not from a headline. She looked at him for a long moment. 5 minutes. Talk through the door. He exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for 3 days. Laura Hendricks filed a harassment report against a male colleague in January of last year. The report went to HR and then to my desk. I reviewed it. He stopped. And then my CFO came to me and said the subject of the complaint was the primary contact for our largest account, worth $11 million annually. He said moving forward with disciplinary action created significant risk of losing the relationship. The hallway was completely quiet. I told HR to handle it quietly. I did not instruct anyone to fire her, but I made the priority clear, and someone in that chain removed what they saw as the obstacle. His voice was stripped of everything except the bare fact of it. Laura Hendricks lost her job because I chose money over doing the right thing. Natalie was silent for a long time. That is worse than what I imagined, she finally said. I know. You did not do the wrong thing for complicated reasons, Dominic. You did the wrong thing for profitable ones. Yes. Is there anything else? Any other version of you that I am going to find out about through a news alert? No, I swear to you, but I understand completely if you do not believe that right now. She looked at him through the gap in the door. The man she had married, the man who had destroyed her, the man who had been showing up every Sunday for months without complaint, the man who had just told her the worst version of himself without deflecting once. "I need time," she said. "Take whatever you need. Do not contact me until I reach out first." Understood. She closed the door, walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, drank it slowly. Narrator voiceover. Actionable advice. Number 3. Pay close attention to how people respond when they are caught. Not how they behave when everything is easy, but what they do when there is no good option left, when the truth is expensive and the lie would have been simpler. Do they deflect? Do they minimize? Do they find someone else to carry the blame? Or do they stand still, look you in the eye, and tell you exactly what they did and why? The response to being caught reveals more about a person's character than years of careful behavior ever could. Remember that. 2 months later, Dominic settled the lawsuit. Publicly. Full financial compensation to Laura Hendricks. A formal written apology. And, without being asked or legally required, her position reinstated with full back pay and a promotion to a senior role. He did not have to do any of it. He chose to. Natalie read about it in the news, did not contact him, but she read it twice. The Sunday visits resumed on week 9. Oliver, now 9 months old, had mastered the art of pulling himself to a standing position using any available surface, and regarded this achievement with the deep satisfaction of a man who has climbed a mountain. His vocabulary consisted of 4 sounds, all deployed interchangeably for all purposes. Life was good, in Oliver's estimation. The visits settled back into their rhythm. Then, on a Thursday evening, a text arrived. Dominic. Singapore deal, closing Monday. Need to be there, Sunday morning. We will miss the visit. I am sorry. Natalie read it. Set her phone down. There it is, she thought. The first real test. And the first real crack. She did not respond. Saturday evening, her doorbell rang. Unexpected. She checked the camera. Dominic in a suit, looking like he had not slept. She opened the door with the chain on. You have a visit tomorrow? I know. I needed to tell you something in person. Can I come in? Just for a minute? She studied his face, undid the chain. He stepped inside, tie loosened, eyes red at the edges. I am not going to Singapore, he said. She blinked. I saw your text. I sent that text and then sat in my car for an hour and called my partner and told him I am out. He ran a hand over his face. It is a significant contract. Months of negotiation. We have been building toward this deal since February. Dominic, I am not going. He looked at her directly. It is Sunday tomorrow. I said I would be there every Sunday. And the first time something comes up that actually tests that, I am not choosing the thing over the promise. Not again. Not ever again. Natalie was very still. You are going to lose business over this. Probably. Your partners are furious. They will recover or they will not. Either way, it does not outweigh this. He held her gaze. For 3 years I came home late. I missed dinners and anniversaries and the ordinary moments that do not make the calendar, but turn out to be the whole thing. You waited for me until you could not anymore. I cannot give you back those years. He paused. But I can show you that I learned something from losing them. He left before she could respond. Natalie stood in her entryway, Oliver on her hip, staring at the closed door. Rachel called 15 minutes later. Did Dominic actually turn down the Singapore deal? How do you already know about this? Connor texted me. He said Dominic's partners are absolutely losing their minds. Months of work, major international expansion opportunity, and Dominic walked away to keep a 1-hour supervised visit with a baby who does not even know his name yet. Natalie said nothing. Natalie. Rachel's voice shifted into its careful register. Men do not do that to maintain appearances. Men who are performing cancel the visit and send an expensive gift. She paused. That is something else. Maybe. Or maybe you are scared to believe that he has actually changed. Maybe that too. Both things can be true at the same time. Yeah, Natalie said quietly. I know. Sunday arrived. 2 o'clock exactly. Dominic knocked. He looked like he had not slept, but he was there. On time. Exactly. Natalie opened the door without speaking. This Sunday was different in a way that was hard to name precisely. Not warmer, not softer, but changed. The way a room changes when someone opens a window. The same room, but something moving through it now that had not been there before. When she handed Oliver to Dominic, he sat on the floor instead of the chair. Oliver, delighted by this development, immediately attempted to eat Dominic's watch, and Natalie, for the first time, sat next to him, not across the room, next to him. When we were married, she said, not looking at him, I used to wait for you. You would text that you would be home by 7, then 8, then 9, and I would sit there thinking, do I matter enough to be someone's priority, or am I just the person waiting at home while the real life happens somewhere else? You mattered. His voice was low. You always mattered. I just did not act like it. No, I did not. Oliver looked up at both of them with great seriousness, made a sound of apparent importance, returned to the watch. He needs diapers, Natalie said. Size 3. And sweet potato baby food, not carrots. He hates carrots. A pause. I will bring them next Sunday. Okay. Small. Ordinary. The most domestic exchange they had managed in over a year. It felt unexpectedly like something. Couples therapy began on a Tuesday, Natalie's idea. She had not framed it as reconciliation. She had framed it as reducing conflict for Oliver's sake, which was true, and also was not the only reason, which she was not yet ready to say out loud. Dr. Sandra Cole's office had 2 chairs, angled slightly toward each other. Natalie took the one she always sat in. Dominic took the other. They did not hold hands. They did not sit close. But they were in the same room, on purpose. Toripes choosing to do something hard together. Progress was not linear. Some sessions were quiet and careful, each of them speaking slowly, choosing words the way you choose footholds on uncertain ground. Some sessions erupted. Natalie's years of controlled anger finally finding full expression. Dominic absorbing it without flinching, without defending, without taking a single step toward the door. After the 5th session, walking to their cars in the parking lot, Oliver in his carrier on Natalie's chest, Dominic said something he had not planned to say. I want to fight for us, not just for Oliver, for us. I know I have no right to want that, but I do. Natalie looked at him in the gray afternoon light. Come back Thursday, she said. Tell Dr. Cole what you just told me. His breath caught. Yes, okay, yes. Do not mistake this for a decision. I know. It is a conversation. I know. She started walking toward her car. He did not move, watching her go, understanding that this was exactly as much as he was being offered, and that it was, impossibly, more than he deserved. The second false victory. Tentative, fragile, real. 2 days later, her phone rang. Attorney Glenn Foster. Natalie, I need you to sit down. She sat down. Tell me. A custody motion was filed this afternoon in family court. Natalie went completely still. Dominic said he was not. Dominic did not file this. His personal attorney confirmed he gave no such instruction. The filing came from a secondary legal team connected to the Carson family corporate trust. Glenn paused. Natalie, have you ever heard Dominic mention his father? The afternoon felt suddenly very quiet. No, she said slowly. Not once. In 3 years of marriage, he never mentioned him. His name is Edward Carson Sr., 68 years old. He built the original financial infrastructure that Dominic's company was founded on. He has been, by all appearances, uninvolved in his son's life for the past 2 decades. Until now. Until now. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dominic. I did not file that. I swear to you, I did not. It was my father. I did not know he would do this. Call me, please. She looked at the text. Then at Oliver in his carrier, sleeping peacefully, unaware that the walls his mother had been carefully building had just been attacked from a direction she had not known existed. Narrator. Voiceover. There are moments when the story you thought you were living turns out to have a chapter you did not know about. A door in a room you believed you knew completely. Edward Carson Sr. had been standing behind that door for 30 years, and now he had decided to walk through it. Edward Carson Sr. did not call first. He appeared at Natalie's door on a Thursday morning. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, the kind of man whose every movement communicates that he has never waited for anything in his life. She opened the door but did not step back. Ms. Carson? His voice was warm in the way that very expensive things are warm. Surface, deep, manufactured for effect. I believe we should speak. I do not know who you are. I am the reason my son has a company. A brief pause. And I am the reason that custody filing happened. May I come in? Natalie did not move. No. Edward continued as though she had not spoken. My grandson is a Carson heir. He carries a family legacy built over 40 years. I intend to ensure he is raised with the resources and structure that legacy requires. Your grandson, Natalie said, with a calm she could feel herself manufacturing in real time, has a mother. She is raising him beautifully. She does not need your resources or your structure. Our legal team disagrees. You are a single woman working part-time. Full-time, I reduced my schedule for 6 months postpartum. I have been full-time since Oliver was 4 months old. Without significant, visible assets, without assets visible to you, there is a meaningful difference. Edward looked at her. Something moved across his face. The beginning of a recognition he had not expected. You seem like a very smart woman, Natalie. I am. Smart women recognize when they are in a situation beyond their current resources. Smart women, Natalie said, also recognize a man in a good suit using legal language to describe something that is actually just a power play. She held his gaze steadily. I know what this is. You stayed invisible for decades, and now there is an heir and a legacy at stake, and you have decided my son is an asset worth acquiring. She gripped the door. He is not an asset. He is my child. You will not be getting anywhere near him without my explicit permission, which I am not granting. Are we clear? Edward Carson Sr. looked at her for a long, assessing moment. We will be in touch, he said. He turned and left. Natalie closed the door, stood in her entryway alone. Her hands, she noticed with some surprise, were completely steady. She called Rachel. His father, she said. Dominic has a father. Silence. I thought he never mentioned him once in 3 years. She walked to the window, watching a town car pull away from the curb below. He showed up at my door this morning, in a suit. He called Oliver a legacy. Natalie. Rachel's voice shifted into high alert. We need a better lawyer. Like, right now. I am literally Googling while driving. Please do not Google while driving. I am at a red light. I have 3 names already. Okay. I dropped my phone. I am fine. The phone is fine. Calling you right back. Catastrophic event number 1. The patriarch, arriving from a direction no one had anticipated. 24 hours later, a photograph appeared online. It had been taken without Natalie's knowledge. A long lens, from a distance. She was outside the hospital. The night of Oliver's fever, 5 in the morning, her hair loose, her coat thrown over pajamas, her face exhausted and terrified and entirely unguarded. The site that posted it was the kind that does not verify sources. The headline read, "Secret Baby Scandal. Who is the woman at the center of Dominic Carson's custody battle?" Her phone did not stop ringing. Old colleagues, distant acquaintances, people she had not spoken to in years, all reaching out with the specific energy of people who want to appear supportive while learning everything. At 11 o'clock, HR from the firm where she had been in final stages of a senior position called. The HR director's voice was pained in the way that telegraphs bad news from the first syllable. "Natalie, I am so sorry. The partners feel that given the current media attention, and this is not a reflection of your qualifications, please hear that, we need to put the offer on hold indefinitely." "I understand," Natalie said. "I am truly sorry. Thank you for calling directly." She hung up, sat very still. Oliver was on his playmat, moving a wooden block from one hand to the other with enormous concentration, entirely unbothered by the fact that his mother's professional future had just been suspended. He looked up at her, smiled his whole face smile. She did not cry. Narrator, voiceover, actionable advice. Number 4. The bottom drops out sometimes. When it does, everything in you wants to react immediately, to send the text, to post the post, to call the person and say all the things that have been building. Here's what I want you to hear. Do not make permanent decisions in temporary pain. Give yourself 24 hours before doing anything you cannot undo. The storm always looks different by morning. What feels like the end of everything at midnight rarely looks the same at 9 in the morning. Wait, breathe, then decide from a place of clarity, not from the center of the storm. Family court, Monday morning. Natalie sat beside attorney Glenn Foster, Oliver in his carrier beside her chair, gray suit, hair up, face giving nothing away. Across the room, Edward Carson Sr.'s legal team, 6 attorneys, a table stacked with documentation that had clearly been assembled over weeks. In the gallery behind them, Dominic. He had found out about the hearing 40 minutes ago. He looked like a man who had been running and arrived just slightly too late to stop something already in motion. He caught Natalie's eye. Across the room, shook his head. Once, I did not know. She looked away. She looked. The opposing lead attorney stood, gray-templed, deliberate, the kind of voice designed for courtrooms. Your Honor, in the matter of Carson versus Carson, we would like to submit documentation regarding the minor child's current living situation. Specifically, he opened a folder. Ms. Carson underwent treatment for anxiety during her pregnancy. She has attended ongoing therapy since the birth. We have documentation from those sessions indicating significant periods of emotional instability, expressed doubts about her parenting capability, and ongoing negative emotional states toward the child's father that we believe could impact. Natalie's body went cold. Her therapy records, her most private, most honest, most vulnerable moments, everything she had said in Dr. Cole's office when she believed she was safe to tell the truth, sitting in a manila folder in a courtroom. Objection! Glenn Foster was on his feet immediately. Those records were obtained without patient consent This constitutes a clear violation of therapist-patient privilege, and we will be filing a motion to— Mr. Foster, the opposing attorney began smoothly. Stop. The word came from behind the bar. Everyone turned. Dominic was standing. Mr. Carson, the judge said, you are not a named party to this proceeding, and I need you to— I am the father of the child in question. His voice was controlled and absolute. And I am formally instructing my father's legal team to withdraw every filing, every document, and every claim they have made in this courtroom today. I did not authorize this hearing. I did not authorize the use of any confidential records. I did not authorize any of this. Edward Carson Sr. turned slowly in his seat. Dominic. His voice was a warning dressed as a single word. No. Dominic looked at his father. And there was something in that look, Natalie thought, that had been building for 30 years. No. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I apologize for this proceeding. Every document filed today was obtained and submitted without my knowledge or consent by a third party using legal resources connected to my family trust. I am requesting that all filings be formally withdrawn and that any privileged records obtained improperly be sealed and destroyed. The courtroom held itself absolutely still. The judge looked from Dominic to the opposing attorney to Edward Carson Sr. Mr. Whitfield, she said, does your client wish to respond? Edward stood slowly. He looked at his son for a long moment, then at Natalie, then back at his son. Whatever calculation he ran in that moment, its result was visible in the slight, precise shift of his expression. We withdraw, he said. Catastrophic event number 3. The courtroom ambush survived. Courthouse steps, afternoon light, the city moving indifferently around them. Natalie stood with Oliver against her shoulder. Dominic stood 6 feet away. You did not know, she said. I swear on Oliver's life, I did not know. I would never. Natalie, your therapy records. His voice broke slightly. Everything you said in that room, believing you were safe. I know. I am so sorry. I am so— Do not. She looked at him. I need you to understand something. Your father walked into my home. He called my son a legacy. He treated me like an obstacle to be managed around. And sitting in that courtroom, watching his team use the most honest things I have ever said as weapons. Her voice fractured for just a moment. I understood, for the first time, exactly why you are the way you are. What it must have been like to grow up being taught that people are either useful or they are in the way. Dominic was very still. You married me, she continued, and somewhere along the way you forgot which category I was in, and I think that was his voice in your head, not yours. But Dominic— She met his eyes steadily. You have to decide, every single day, which voice you are going to listen to. His or yours. He had no argument. She was exactly right, and they both knew it. I stood up today, he said. You did. I will stand up every day, whatever it costs me. She looked at him for a long moment. Thursday, she said. Dr. Cole, do not be late. Therapy continued, not linearly, not smoothly, but consistently. Some sessions Natalie walked out in the middle and came back 10 minutes later, and they kept going. Some sessions Dominic sat with things being said about him that were entirely true and did not move from the chair. On the 6th session, Natalie said something she had not planned. I remember who you were. Before that night, the man who took me to a small Ethiopian restaurant on our second date because I had mentioned it once, weeks before, and he had written it down somewhere. The man who proposed while we were making eggs on a Sunday morning because he said he did not want to wait for a special occasion. The man who— She stopped. I hate that I remember. It would be so much simpler if you were just the worst version of yourself, a clean villain with no history. I am not just the worst version, Dominic said quietly. I know. That is the problem. On the 8th Sunday, Oliver, pulling himself to standing, using Dominic's knee as a handhold, looked up at his father's face and said, with absolute clarity, his first real word, Dada. Dominic stopped breathing entirely. Natalie, from the couch, closed her eyes. The pure joy on Dominic's face was too much to look at directly. Rachel, in her corner, looked at the ceiling instead. Oliver said it again, with great satisfaction, as though confirming a successful experiment. Dada. That night, alone with Oliver asleep, Natalie sat in the quiet of her living room and let herself feel the thing she had been managing around for months. She still loved him. It was inconvenient and complicated, and it did not erase a single thing he had done. But it was true. She called Rachel. His first word was Dada, she said. I know, I was there, and I realized I am jealous. The admission came out quietly, not of Walton, of Oliver loving him, but jealous that my son can love Dominic without any of the weight, without the memory of that night. He just... She stopped. He just loves him, simply, because Dominic shows up and is there and is trying. Because you let him be there, Rachel said gently. That was your choice. You made that possible. I still love him, Rach. She said it plainly, without drama. After everything, I still love him, and I hate how much simpler everything would be if I did not. That does not make you weak. It makes me terrified. Of what? Of letting him back in and having him destroy me again. Of Oliver watching that happen. Rachel was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? I think you are brave enough to find out which version of him is real now. I think you have been brave enough for a long time. You just have not given yourself credit for it yet. At the next therapy session, Natalie looked at Dominic directly and said the thing she had been carrying for months. I am tired. I am so tired of being angry. I am tired of pretending I do not still feel anything. I am tired of the wall. Dr. Cole said, What do you feel right now? Natalie looked at Dominic. Furious that you destroyed what we had. Terrified you will do it again. Angry at myself for considering giving you another chance. She paused. And in love with you. Still, I hate all of it. And yet it is all true simultaneously. The room held that for a moment. You still love me, Dominic said. He looked as though something had just cracked open inside him that had been sealed for a very long time. Do not. Natalie's voice was firm. That does not fix anything. Loving you does not mean I trust you. It does not mean I forgive you. It means I remember who we were before you broke us. That is all it means right now. Then I will spend every day building something worth remembering again. You cannot promise that. I can promise I will spend the rest of my life trying not to fail it. Dr. Cole said, You do not have to decide anything today, but you have taken the hardest step, saying the true thing out loud. Walking to the parking lot afterward, Oliver reaching for Dominic from the carrier. Dada. Dominic looked at Natalie. She unclipped Oliver from the carrier and handed him over. Oliver settled immediately, contentedly, against his father's shoulder. He trusts you, Natalie said. I know. Do not make him regret that. Ever. I will spend my life making sure he does not. They stood there, not quite a family yet, not quite broken anymore. In the gray afternoon light, their son between them, and Natalie felt the wall shift. Not fall, just shift. Narrator, voiceover, wisdom moment, number 5. Here's the thing about forgiveness that nobody tells you. It is not a single decision. It is not a moment where you choose and then it is done. Forgiveness is a practice. It is something you choose again every morning, sometimes every hour, for a long time. And the measure of whether someone deserves to be forgiven is not whether they have suffered enough. It is whether they have changed enough. Watch the actions, not the words. Watch what they do when it is inconvenient. Watch what they choose when the choice is hard. That is where the truth is. Natalie called him on a Tuesday evening. "Come over tomorrow. Alone. We need to talk." When Dominic arrived the next afternoon, she was already seated on the couch. Not the chair she usually directed him to, but the couch. She gestured to the cushion beside her, not across the room, beside her. He sat. Oliver was in his playpen nearby, conducting important research on a set of stacking cups. Natalie looked at her son for a moment before she spoke. "I am not over what you did," she said. "I want to be absolutely clear about that. The night you told me to leave, the things you said, they are in me. They will be in me for a long time, possibly always. There will be days when I hear those words like they were just spoken, and on those days you are going to have to give me space and not take it personally. I understand. I am doing this for Oliver." She met his eyes. "He deserves to grow up with a father who is present and consistent and real. And I deserve—" She paused, looked down for a moment, back up. "I deserve to find out whether the man I married can become the man I needed. I owe myself that honesty." "Tell me the terms," Dominic said. "All of them. Therapy as long as I say. You do not push for more than I am offering. You do not treat every small opening as permission to push the whole wall down. Oliver comes first in every decision you make. Your schedule, your business, your everything. If you choose anything over him once without a reason I would accept, you lose access." She held his gaze. "If you ever speak to me the way you spoke to me that night, once, we are done. Permanently. No conversation." "Understood. Your father does not come near Oliver without my explicit prior permission stated in writing. That is non-negotiable. Done? I will handle my father. And Dominic." She looked at him steadily. "This is probation. You understand that? You are on trial for the rest of your life. There is no point at which you have proven yourself enough that I stop paying attention. That is not how this works. I accept that. You are not moving in. You do not get a key. You do not make decisions about Oliver without me. You keep every appointment. You keep every promise. You build this slowly, visit by visit, day by day, for as long as it takes. However long it takes," he said. "Years. I have the rest of my life." Natalie looked at him. "I still love you," she said quietly. "I have said it out loud now to enough people that pretending otherwise is pointless. But loving you and trusting you are two completely different things. Right now I have one of those. The other one—" She paused. "The other one is what this is for. You have to earn it. Not once. Continuously. I know. If you are uncertain, even a little, tell me right now, because I am risking my peace, my stability, my son's emotional security. So if there is any part of you that is doing this out of guilt or obligation or the desire to feel less terrible about what you did, there is no uncertainty." He said it with the quiet, unperformative certainty of a man who has had a very long time to understand exactly what he has to lose. "I am all in. I have been all in since the morning after I drove you away, when I woke up and realized what I had done and who I had become. I have just been waiting for the chance to prove it." Natalie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Oliver. "Come here, Bug," she said. Oliver looked up from his stacking cups, assessed the situation, decided it required his presence, crawled to the couch, with great purpose, and lifted his arms. Natalie Wan picked him up, settled him between them on the couch. Oliver looked at Dominic, looked at Natalie, made a sound of approval, picked up Dominic's hand, and began examining his watch with great interest. "Stay for dinner," Natalie said. Dominic looked at her. "Not as my husband," she said. "Not yet. As Oliver's father, just stay. We will eat. We will talk about ordinary things. And you will go home afterward. Okay? Can you do ordinary? I will try. That," she said, "is the right answer." They ate pasta at her small kitchen table. Oliver sat in his high chair between them, methodically moving food from one side of his tray to the other with the focused methodology of someone conducting important research on gravity. It was awkward. It was careful. It was imperfect in all the ways that genuine things are. Dominic said something about a park near his office that had a good playground. Natalie said Oliver had recently discovered that pushing things off surfaces was very satisfying. Dominic said that sounded like a Carson trait. Natalie said she was choosing to take that as a compliment. Oliver looked between them and banged his spoon on his tray with enormous approval. Rachel texted midway through dinner. "Connor said he is there. Are you okay?" Natalie looked up at Dominic, who was making an extremely patient face, while Oliver deposited a piece of pasta directly onto his sleeve. She typed back, "Yeah, I think so." When dinner was over and Dominic stood to leave, Natalie walked him to the door. They stood in the narrow hallway, not touching, not distant, the specific proximity of people who have been broken and are learning, slowly, whether the pieces still fit. "Same time Sunday," she said, "same time Sunday." And Dominic, "Yeah, do not make me regret this." "I will not." He said it without drama, without performance, just the plain fact of his commitment, offered without any expectation that she would simply believe it. "I promise you, I will spend every day proving I am worth this chance. You will not have to take my word for it. You will see it." He left. She closed the door, leaned against it. Oliver, in the living room, made an inquisitive sound. She went to him, lifted him, held him against her chest with both arms. "Your daddy is trying, Bug," she whispered into his hair. "He is really trying." Oliver grabbed a fistful of her collar. "That is fair," she said. 1 year later, a backyard, August, the kind of afternoon that seems designed to make everything feel more possible. Oliver, 20 months old, opinions about everything, recently discovered the word no and deploying it constantly, chased Rachel across the lawn with the focused determination of someone who had a clear objective and no interest in obstacles. Rachel narrated her own retreat with great drama. "He is gaining. I am cutting left. He has anticipated the cut. This child is unnaturally fast for his body weight." She stepped over a sprinkler head with excessive caution. Oliver sat down hard in the grass, assessed his knees, found them acceptable, stood up, and kept coming. "Incredible resilience," Rachel announced. "Absolutely championship level getting back up." On the porch steps, Natalie laughed. Dominic came out from the kitchen with 2 glasses of lemonade. Sat beside her on the steps. Not too close, still earning. "He is going to be fast," Dominic said. "He is going to be chaos. He gets the stubbornness from you. He gets the single-mindedness from you." Fair enough. They sat in the warm afternoon and watched Oliver conduct an extremely serious negotiation with Rachel over possession of a foam ball. Rachel eventually surrendered the ball with considerable dignity. Oliver held it aloft like a trophy. "We are not fixed," Natalie said. "I know. I still have bad days. Days where I hear what you said, and it is like it happened that morning. I know. On those days, tell me. I will give you space. I am not going anywhere. You say that now. I say it now, and I will say it in 10 years, and I will mean it exactly as much both times. She looked at him sideways. That is a long time. Yeah. You understand what you are signing up for. I understand completely. Oliver, having confirmed possession of the foam ball, came toddling toward the porch steps with great ceremony. He reached them, looked up at both his parents, and held the ball out. An offering. Mama, he said. Dada. Then he sat down on the bottom step, directly between them, leaned back against Dominic's knees, like this was simply where he belonged, and began examining the ball with focused attention. Natalie looked at her son, felt the full, complicated, real weight of the afternoon. The damage still present, the love still present, both of them present simultaneously, neither canceling the other out. Ask me next Tuesday, she said. Ask you what? Whether it is enough. A pause. Is it? Ask me Tuesday, she said again. But she was smiling. A real one. The kind that comes back slowly, after a long time away, and lands differently than it left. Dominic looked at her, looked at Oliver, looked at the summer afternoon around them. He did not push, did not press, did not ask again, just sat beside her in the warm August light, their son between them, and let the moment be exactly what it was. Enough, for now. Enough. Narrator. Natalie's voice, direct address. I want to tell you something before we go. The morning I walked into that building with Oliver against my chest, I was not brave. I was exhausted and terrified and running on the specific kind of energy that only exists when anger and grief have not fully sorted themselves out yet. But I showed up anyway, and I have been thinking about that a lot lately. About what showing up actually means. It does not mean having it figured out. It does not mean knowing how it ends. It just means you got yourself there. You got to the moment. Whatever comes next, you handle when it arrives. If someone has told you that you are worthless, please hear me clearly. That is information about them. Not about you, never about you. You are not defined by what someone said in their worst moment. You are defined by what you did the morning after. If you are sitting somewhere right now, wondering how you are going to get through this, whatever this is for you, I want you to know something. You will do it the same way I did. One day, one decision, one entirely ordinary step at a time. And if you are lucky, you will have a best friend who steals your crackers and provides live sports commentary on your toddler's attempts to defeat her in foot races. Oliver is almost 2 now. He has recently learned to open the refrigerator. He has strong opinions about which socks are acceptable and which are not. He is the most extraordinary person I have ever met in my life. His first word was, Dada. I have made my peace with that. Take care of yourselves. You are worth taking care of. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Music. Slow fade. End card. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear they are not worthless. Like and subscribe to stay with this family. Fade out. Editorial disclaimer. The story you are about to hear was carefully researched, constructed, and manually edited by our team, written with the intention of delivering meaning, emotional truth, and real value to every person who listens. Every scene, every word, every lesson embedded in this narrative was built by hand, with care, to make sure that what you take away from this story is something worth carrying. This is not content made for clicks. This is content made for people. Thank you for being one of them.